Why most people stay weak, and how Stoics escape it. Weakness as a daily ritual. Weakness rarely arrives with a roar. It does not strike like a sudden storm that tears down walls and uproots trees. Weakness is slower, more cunning, more ordinary. It is practiced in the small moments, repeated in patterns so subtle that we hardly notice them shaping us. Each time we give in to ease instead of effort, each time we let fear dictate our choices, each time we avoid the uncomfortable truth in favor of a pleasant lie, we are not standing still. We are rehearsing weakness, and rehearsed enough, weakness becomes ritual, woven into the rhythm of our days until it defines us without us ever realizing when the descent began. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They warned that life is not lost in one great catastrophe, but in the slow drip of wasted hours, in the gentle habit of surrendering to the path of least resistance. Consider the man who tells himself he will rise early to meet the day with clarity. The alarm sounds, his hand reaches out, and he whispers that 5 more minutes will do no harm. That whisper is weakness rehearsed. Multiply it by years, and you see how a man loses his strength not by force, but by permission. Or think of the one who promises himself to speak the truth, but in a moment of discomfort chooses the easier path of silence or flattery. The compromise is small, almost invisible, yet it corrodes his character. The ritual of weakness is not dramatic. It is quiet, polite, reasonable even. But it is relentless, and it builds a cage no less binding than iron chains. The Stoics knew that rituals shape destiny. They argued that if you do not consciously craft your habits will quietly craft you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that the world would meet him with deceit, arrogance, and ignorance, not to despair, but to prepare. He understood that expecting ease is the first step toward fragility. Seneca warned against the wasted life of postponement, of letting small pleasures dictate the direction of one's existence. Epictetus, born a slave, taught that weakness comes not from circumstance, but from yielding one's inner command to external forces. Together, their message was uncompromising. Weakness is a daily decision, just as strength is. Think of your own day. How many choices do you make on autopilot? How many times do you reach for distraction instead of discipline, for comfort instead of clarity? The modern world has perfected the art of feeding weakness. Endless entertainment, shallow diversions, the quick thrill of approval from strangers, all are designed to keep you rehearsing weakness until it becomes second nature. You are not asked to make one grand surrender. You are only asked to choose the easy road in small steps, until you wake up one day and realize you have been walking in circles, too tired to climb the mountain that was once yours to claim. To break this cycle requires an awakening, not a single burst of motivation, but a recognition that every small act matters. The ritual of weakness must be met with the ritual of strength, to rise when the body begs to stay down, to confront the truth when it would be simpler to ignore it, to embrace discomfort when every voice tells you to run from it. These acts may seem insignificant, but they form the counter-ritual that rebuilds character. The Stoics called this philosophy, but it is better understood as training, a gym for the soul, where each rep is measured not in weight lifted but in impulses mastered. Do not deceive yourself into thinking you can remain neutral. Each day you are rehearsing something. Either you rehearse weakness by drifting, postponing, indulging, and excusing, or you rehearse strength by choosing, acting, resisting, and enduring. There is no middle ground. The question is not whether you will perform a ritual today, but which one. Will you allow weakness to continue shaping you in silence, or will you interrupt it with deliberate acts of strength? This is where the Stoic path begins, not in grand speeches or lofty ideals, but in the raw honesty of daily choices. The cost of continuing the ritual of weakness is subtle but devastating. It is the dull ache of a life unlived, the quiet despair of unrealized potential, the corrosive knowledge that you are capable of more but consistently settle for less. And yet the moment you decide to break the pattern, even in the smallest way, you declare war on that slow death. One honest word, one completed task, one endured discomfort is enough to begin dismantling the cage you have built around yourself. The ritual of weakness is strong only because it has gone unchallenged. The moment you face it, its grip begins to loosen. This is the truth the Stoics invite us to face. Weakness is not an external curse, but an internal ritual. And the escape does not require waiting for tomorrow or for the perfect circumstance. It requires beginning now, in this moment, with whatever is in front of you. Choose strength once, and you weaken the ritual of weakness. Choose it again, and you begin to build a new rhythm. Soon, what felt impossible becomes natural, and what once enslaved you loses its power. Most people stay weak because they never recognize the ritual they are practicing. But you are not most people. You are aware, and awareness is the first strike against the cycle. The illusion of endless tomorrows. The greatest lie weakness tells is that there is always more time. It whispers that tomorrow will carry less weight, that next week will be easier, that next month you will finally gather the discipline you lacked today. And so people stay weak, not because they choose ruin openly, but because they believe they can delay strength without consequence. Life is lived as if it were endless credit with no bill to pay. Yet the Stoics saw through this illusion with clarity sharper than steel. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that death stands over every shoulder, and that to postpone virtue is to gamble with a future that does not belong to you. Seneca, in his letters, declared that life is long enough if lived wisely, but that it feels short only because we waste it. Epictetus warned against putting off the task of becoming free, for the chains of habit harden each day you wait. The illusion of endless tomorrows is the most common ritual of weakness, and perhaps the most dangerous. When you imagine you have more time, you lower your guard. You allow yourself to compromise today, believing you can correct it later, but later never comes. You intend to confront your fear, to train your will, to speak truth. Yet you push it into the fog of another day. That fog grows thicker the longer you delay, until you cannot even see the path you meant to walk. Every day becomes a rehearsal not of strength, but of postponement. You train yourself to wait, and waiting becomes who you are. The Stoics understood this as the silent theft of life. Seneca wrote that while we waste our days in hesitation, life itself runs away. You cannot afford to think of time as something you own in abundance. It is not wealth stored in a chest. It is water leaking from a cracked vessel, dripping whether you notice or not. Look around and you will see this illusion everywhere. People tell themselves they will start living differently after the next promotion, after the next relationship, after the next crisis passes. They place their lives on hold, believing the right moment is waiting in the distance. But life is not waiting. It is moving, with or without them. Weakness thrives in this delay, because delay provides comfort. If you do not act today, you do not have to face failure today. If you postpone discipline, you postpone the sting of discomfort. It feels safe, but it is a trap. Each delayed act becomes a stone laid on the path of mediocrity, and soon the road is built so solidly you cannot imagine walking another way. The Stoics rebelled against this illusion by insisting on urgency. They called it memento mori, the remembrance of death, not to depress, but to awaken. To remember that you are mortal is to see the value of each hour. You are not guaranteed another sunrise. You are not promised another conversation with the people you love. You are not assured that tomorrow will bring the strength you refuse to practice today. Marcus Aurelius commanded himself to live as if each day were his last, because one day it will be. That awareness dissolves the illusion of endless tomorrows and confronts you with the raw truth. This moment is the only ground on which strength can be built. If you wait for the perfect time, you are waiting for something that does not exist. There is no later without now. The one who says, "I will be strong tomorrow," is already weak today, because the habit of postponement grows deeper with each repetition. To break this illusion, you must treat today as the arena, not when the schedule clears, not when life is kinder, not when conditions are perfect. Now. The Stoics did not wait for ideal circumstances. They practiced strength in the harshness of reality. They trained their will in adversity, their clarity in chaos, their composure in insult. They saw that the only time to begin is the time you are tempted to wait. That is the battlefield where weakness and strength collide. The tragedy is that most people will never awaken from this illusion. They will wait until they are older, until life forces them to look back and count the wasted years. By then, the opportunities have passed, the strength untrained, the life unlived. But you do not have to follow that path. You can end the ritual of postponement today. You can embrace urgency, not in panic but in clarity, knowing that every delay is another link in the chain of weakness. The Stoic way is to act now, to live now, to train now, because now is the only territory you truly own. Every breath wasted on hesitation is weakness rehearsed, but every breath spent in deliberate action is strength practiced. The illusion of endless tomorrows is what keeps the masses asleep. Awareness of mortality is what allows the few to wake up. The marketplace of distractions. The modern world has transformed attention into the most valuable currency, and weakness is the price most are willing to pay. Step outside or open a screen, and you are immediately pulled into the marketplace of distractions. Endless entertainment, glowing feeds, constant notifications, each one offering a brief surge of pleasure at the cost of your focus. This is how weakness multiplies today, not in dramatic acts of surrender, but in the constant purchase of distraction. A few minutes wasted here, another hour lost there, and suddenly entire years vanish without a single deliberate act of strength to show for them. The marketplace is designed to keep you as a customer for life, dependent on the small doses of comfort it provides. Most do not even recognize the transaction. They believe they are consuming entertainment, but in truth, entertainment is consuming them. The Stoics warned against this centuries ago. To them, attention was sacred, the gateway through which all strength or weakness entered. If your attention is sold, your freedom is gone. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that the value of your thoughts is the value of your soul. What you allow to occupy your mind defines what kind of life you will live. If your mind is filled with distractions, there is no room for depth, for discipline, for clarity. Weakness grows in shallow soil. Seneca cautioned against being everywhere except with oneself, scattering one's time across endless diversions until nothing meaningful remains. In our era, his warning is magnified 1,000 times. Never before has it been so easy to remain endlessly entertained while growing endlessly weaker. Each distraction feels harmless, but together they form a prison made not of iron, but of endless stimulation. Consider how this marketplace operates. It offers quick rewards with no effort required. A video that makes you laugh, a message that flatters your ego, a headline that stirs your outrage. Each one gives you a feeling of being alive, while quietly draining the discipline to live fully. The Stoics would call this slavery, not to another person, but to impulses you no longer command. Epictetus taught that the truly free man is the one who masters his own desires, not the one who indulges them. In the marketplace of distractions, freedom is traded away in small increments until you no longer know who is directing your life. You become a customer of weakness, paying in hours, paying in energy, paying in potential. This is why the Stoics urged vigilance. They treated the mind as a fortress to be guarded, not a public square to be invaded by every noise and vendor that passed through. To guard your attention is to guard your strength. Every time you resist distraction, you are not merely withholding your gaze, you are training your will. You are declaring that your focus belongs to you, not to the sellers of comfort. Strength is not built in a distant battlefield, but in these small victories, where you decide whether your mind will be a fortress or a marketplace. Most people choose the marketplace without realizing it. They open the gates and invite every distraction to rule them, and weakness flourishes in that chaos. But you have the power to step out of the market. You have the choice to treat your attention as something priceless. The Stoics would tell you that the most valuable resource is not money, not possessions, but time and focus. Once spent, it cannot be regained. To waste it on distractions is to waste your life. To master it is to reclaim your strength. Each moment you spend with clarity is an act of rebellion against the market. Each act of focus is proof that you cannot be bought. The path of weakness is paved with scattered attention, but the path of strength is carved by deliberate focus. The choice between the two is made every hour, every minute, every breath. The weight of invisible chains. Weakness does not always appear as laziness or indulgence. More often, it hides in attachments so subtle that most never question them. These are the invisible chains, the constant need for approval, the craving for validation, the habits we defend, though they quietly erode us. A man may appear free because no one commands him, yet he walks bound by expectations, routines, and fears that dictate his every move. These chains are not forged by iron, but by repetition, by yielding to impulses until they become necessities. The Stoics saw this with piercing clarity. They warned that true slavery begins when you cannot live without what once seemed optional. Every dependence, however small, is a link in the chain of weakness. Seneca wrote that it is not the man who has little, but the man who longs for more, who is poor. The hunger for recognition, the endless pursuit of external validation, keeps countless people weak. They dress for the approval of strangers, speak for the applause of crowds, post for the fleeting rush of likes, and live enslaved to the eyes of others. Such a life is not strength, but servitude. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to care more for his own integrity than for the opinions of those who might praise or condemn him. He understood that a man who depends on the approval of others has surrendered the command of his soul. Epictetus went further. Freedom means being indifferent to what is beyond your control. If your peace can be stolen by another's judgment, you are not free, you are chained. Invisible chains also hide in comforts disguised as harmless habits. The nightly indulgence that becomes impossible to skip, the idle entertainment that transforms into necessity, the small escape that becomes routine. Weakness is nourished by these quiet dependencies until they harden into shackles. Most people do not notice the weight until they try to break free. The moment they attempt discipline, they discover how much power their habits hold over them. And so they remain trapped, not by force, but by the belief that they cannot live without what is slowly consuming them. The Stoics escaped these chains by stripping life down to what was essential. They practiced living with less, not because they despised pleasure, but because they refused to be owned by it. Seneca advised rehearsing poverty, eating coarse bread, wearing rough clothes, asking oneself, "Is this what I feared?" This practice was not misery, but liberation. It broke the illusion that one's well-being depends on external comfort. By choosing hardship voluntarily, they proved to themselves that they were greater than their dependencies. Strength begins when you can stand without the crutches you once leaned on. Ask yourself, what are the invisible chains you carry? What approval do you chase? What comfort have you mistaken for necessity? Each one weakens you, not because it exists, but because it controls you. To sever these chains, you must first see them. Awareness is the blade. The moment you recognize dependence, you can confront it. The moment you confront it, you begin to cut through it. And with each chain broken, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. Weakness flourishes in those who never question their attachments. Strength belongs to those who do, and who refuse to let invisible chains decide the limits of their lives. Silence as the training ground of strength. Silence terrifies most people because it confronts them with themselves. Strip away the noise, the chatter, the endless hum of distraction, and what remains is the raw voice of the mind. For many, that voice is unbearable, so they avoid it at all costs. They drown it in sound, in entertainment, in constant motion. But the Stoics saw silence not as emptiness, but as the harshest and most necessary training ground for strength. To sit with one's own thoughts without fleeing is an act of courage. To examine them, question them, and discipline them in solitude is a battle greater than any fought with swords. Silence reveals the truth of who you are, and that is precisely why so few embrace it. Weakness prefers noise because noise disguises the fragility within. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself as though each line were a conversation with his soul, a dialogue carried out in the arena of silence. His meditations were not written for others, but as training to keep his mind aligned when the world threatened to scatter it. Seneca reminded his students that the mind must be tested in stillness, for a man who cannot endure his own company will never endure the hardships of fate. Epictetus taught that control begins not in the clamor of debate, but in the quiet mastery of one's own impressions. Silence was their weapon, because in silence the enemy is clearest, the restless, undisciplined self that resists order. Think of what happens when you allow yourself true silence. The distractions fall away, and what surfaces are the questions you have been avoiding. Why am I restless? Why do I feel empty? Why do I avoid what I know I must do? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary. They strip away illusion. And it is only when illusion is stripped away that strength can be built. Weakness grows in noise because noise keeps these questions buried. But strength grows in silence because silence forces you to face them. The Stoics would not allow themselves to be carried away blindly by thoughts or impulses. They held them up in the light of reason, examined them, and discarded what was unworthy. This discipline cannot be practiced while running from silence. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of clarity. It is the space in which you reclaim command over your own mind. To endure silence is to wrestle with your impulses, your fears, your desires. At first it feels like punishment, but soon it becomes liberation. You discover that you are not at the mercy of every thought that arises. You discover that you can choose which ones to nurture and which ones to dismiss. This is the beginning of mastery, and mastery is the death of weakness. Most will never know this freedom because they never step into silence long enough to train in it. You do not need hours of retreat in distant mountains to find this training ground. It exists in every moment you resist reaching for distraction. It exists when you sit quietly with your thoughts instead of numbing them with constant input. It exists when you choose to reflect rather than escape. Each moment of chosen silence is a rep in the gym of the soul. And like all training, it begins painfully, but leads to strength that cannot be built in comfort. The Stoics were warriors of silence, knowing that if you can hold your mind steady in stillness, you can hold it steady against the storms of life. To avoid silence is to remain fragile. To embrace it is to forge the steel of inner strength. The discipline of voluntary hardship. The Stoics understood that weakness multiplies when life is too easy. They did not wait for hardship to arrive by chance. They went out to meet it deliberately. This was not the pursuit of suffering for its own sake, but the discipline of voluntary hardship. They knew that to grow strong, one must train the will against resistance. Comfort, when unchecked, softens the mind and the body until even the smallest challenge feels unbearable. But hardship, chosen wisely, tempers the soul like fire tempers iron. To deny yourself what is unnecessary, to endure what is uncomfortable, to practice simplicity when abundance is available, these are not punishments, but rehearsals of strength. Most people avoid them, and so they rehearse weakness instead. The Stoics embraced them, and so they became unshakable. Seneca advised his followers to set aside days each month to live as if they had lost everything. Coarse food, rough clothing, little comfort. He asked them to face this question: is this what I feared? By voluntarily practicing loss, they stripped fear of its teeth. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to accept cold, hunger, and insult as part of nature, not as accidents to resent. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, taught that endurance of hardship is not merely survival, but freedom. For the man who can endure without complaint is no longer ruled by circumstance. Each Stoic saw in voluntary hardship the path to true independence. For if you can thrive with little, then abundance cannot corrupt you. If you can endure pain, then fear cannot rule you. If you can walk willingly into discomfort, then weakness cannot surprise you. In contrast, the modern world offers endless ease, climate-controlled rooms, instant meals, entertainment at a click, convenience everywhere. These comforts are not evil, but dependence on them is deadly. When every moment is designed to soothe, even small adversity feels unbearable. A missed meal, a minor insult, a delay in gratification, these become crises for those who have never trained in hardship. Weakness flourishes in such soil because it has never been tested. And when real storms arrive, as they always do, the untrained collapse under weight they were never prepared to carry. Voluntary hardship is the antidote. It builds resilience before the trial comes. It transforms discomfort from an enemy into a teacher. Think of the ways you might practice this discipline: to walk instead of drive when the road is long, to fast when food is available, to embrace the cold instead of fleeing it, to work without distraction when pleasure tempts you. Each act is small, but each one is a declaration, I am stronger than my impulses. I do not depend on comfort. I can endure. Over time, these acts accumulate into a fortress of resilience. What once felt impossible becomes natural. What once frightened you becomes familiar. And when hardship arrives without your choosing, you meet it with calm because you have already rehearsed its presence. The discipline of voluntary hardship is not about despising pleasure or rejecting abundance. It is about refusing to be owned by them. The man who cannot live without comfort is a servant to it. The man who can step into discomfort at will is free. The Stoics chose hardship not to seek pain, but to claim freedom. And in their freedom, they escaped weakness. This path is open to anyone willing to practice it. It does not require dramatic sacrifice, only deliberate choice. Each time you deny yourself an easy path, you strengthen your will. Each time you embrace discomfort, you loosen the grip of weakness. Voluntary hardship is the forge where strength is made and weakness is broken. The Stoic escape from mediocrity. Strength is not noise, not the display of power that shouts for recognition. True strength is quiet command, the ability to govern oneself fully. Most people stay weak because they live as servants to impulses, chasing every desire, obeying every mood, yielding to every temptation. They are dragged by emotion as a leaf is dragged by the wind, never deciding their own course. The Stoics escaped this trap by practicing inner command, a rebellion not against society, but against the chaos within. To master yourself is the greatest act of defiance in a world where most cannot even sit still without craving distraction. Strength begins where obedience to impulse ends. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that his mind was sovereign, that no insult, no pain, no pleasure had authority over it unless he granted permission. This is the essence of inner command. It is to recognize that your judgments, not events, decide your state of being. Seneca wrote that the greatest empire a man can rule is himself, for no external conquest compares to the discipline of inner governance. Epictetus warned that he who cannot command himself will be commanded by others, not by force, but by manipulation of his desires. To them, strength was not loud conquest but quiet dominion, a throne built not over others, but over one's own unruly mind. Inner command is a rebellion because it resists the natural pull of weakness. When anger rises, the weak lash out, believing they are powerful when in truth they are controlled. When desire tempts, the weak indulge, thinking they have chosen, when in truth they have obeyed. Each surrender feels like freedom, but it is chains disguised as choice. The Stoic rebels refuse this. They meet anger with silence, temptation with restraint, fear with calm. Each act is an assertion. I will not be ruled. Every time they resist impulse, they strengthen the walls of their inner fortress. Over time, they become unshakable, not because life is easy, but because their command is steady. In the modern world, where algorithms and temptations are crafted to pull you by the strings of your own cravings, inner command is more radical than ever. To turn away from constant stimulation, to resist the instant gratification of shallow pleasures, is to rise against an entire system built to weaken you. Each moment of self-control is an act of rebellion against forces that want you restless, dependent, and distracted. To choose discipline in such a world is to stand like a soldier against a tide. It is to declare that you are not for sale, that your mind cannot be bought cheaply with dopamine and noise. This rebellion is not abstract. It takes shape in the smallest decisions: to hold your tongue when provoked, to continue your task when tired, to deny yourself indulgence when it serves no purpose, to focus when everything invites you to scatter. Each choice strengthens the chain of command within, and once that command is solid, nothing external can enslave you. Insults lose their sting, temptations lose their power, fears lose their grip. The weak remain weak because they confuse surrender with freedom. The Stoics became strong because they chose command over chaos. The same choice is in your hands. Every act of restraint is not loss but gain, for with each you build the only kingdom that cannot be taken from you, the kingdom of the self. The Stoic escape from mediocrity. Most people stay weak because they accept mediocrity as the natural state of life. They confuse survival with living, comfort with fulfillment, existence with purpose. They drift along in routines that demand nothing, habits that challenge nothing, environments that offer nothing but repetition. This quiet resignation is the soil where weakness thrives. It does not announce itself with collapse, but with the slow dulling of the spirit, the erosion of ambition, the silencing of the inner voice that once demanded more. The Stoics saw this danger clearly. They refused to bow to mediocrity because they understood it as the most subtle form of decay. To settle for less than what your soul demands is to betray yourself daily until you no longer notice what you have lost. Escaping mediocrity is not about chasing grand achievements, but about refusing to live as if the life given to you were cheap. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the mightiest empire of his age, reminded himself each day that greatness was not in titles, wealth, or applause, but in the daily battle to live with reason, justice, and courage. Even with limitless power, he feared falling into mediocrity of the soul, becoming comfortable in luxury while neglecting virtue. Seneca wrote that life becomes unbearable not because it is hard, but because it is wasted in trivial pursuits. To waste one's years in distractions, gossip, or shallow ambitions is to die long before the body does. Epictetus, born into slavery, became freer than emperors because he refused to let mediocrity define his boundaries. Each of them declared war not only on weakness, but on the quiet settling that breeds it. Mediocrity survives because it feels safe. It asks nothing of you, so it never confronts you. It lets you blend into the crowd, follow the path already worn, and believe that this is enough. But safety without challenge is a cage. It keeps you alive, but it kills the fire within. Weakness is the natural companion of mediocrity, because without striving, without trial, without resistance, strength cannot exist. The Stoics escaped this by treating every day as an arena, an opportunity to sharpen themselves against adversity, to question their own actions, to hold themselves accountable. They knew that if you are not moving toward strength, you are moving toward decay. There is no neutrality. Mediocrity is simply weakness disguised as normalcy. Escaping mediocrity requires rebellion. It requires declaring that you will not live as most live, that you will not measure yourself by the shallow standards of the crowd, that you will not spend your life rehearsing weakness while calling it safety. It requires choosing the hard road when the easy one tempts you, demanding more of yourself when comfort whispers that you have done enough. It requires a daily refusal to let your life be dictated by convenience, approval, or inertia. The Stoics chose this path not because it guaranteed glory, but because it guaranteed integrity. To live with strength, even unseen, was to live fully. To accept mediocrity, even praised, was to die half-lived. The truth is that most will remain weak. They will cling to mediocrity because it asks nothing and costs nothing, until at the end they realize it cost them everything. But you are not bound to this fate. You can choose differently. You can declare war on mediocrity the way the Stoics did, not with noise but with discipline, not with ambition alone but with clarity. Every act of strength is an escape. Every refusal to settle is a victory. The masses will stay asleep in their weakness, but you have the chance to wake, to rise above, to live deliberately, to build strength where others dissolve into comfort. This is the Stoic escape, the path out of mediocrity. It is not offered to all, but it is available to any who choose it, and the choice is yours now.